Good evening and welcome to Buxton Books at 160 King Street in Charleston, South Carolina. I am Polly Buxton and my husband Julian Buxton, and this is our bookstore. We are the booksellers for this evening's conversation with authors Christopher Chambers and Gary Phillips, brought to you by Three Rivers Press. Gary Phillips is an icon in his field who has written, edited, or contributed to over 40 novels, anthologies, and graphic novels. He edited the Anthony Award-winning anthology, I have props here, The Obama Inheritance. Is that the right way?
There you go.
The Obama Inheritance, 15 Stories of Conspiracy Noir, published by our host, Three Rooms Press, and Peter Karloftis, and to which our other distinguished guest, Christopher Chambers, contributed. Buxton Books hosted a fun event for this book a few years back. Gary Phillips is the son of a mechanic and a librarian. His bio says he was weaned on too many comic books, reruns of the original Twilight Zone, and experiences ranging from community organizer to delivering dog cages. To those who are familiar with his books, that makes a little more sense. And maybe we get to hear a little bit more about that later. His latest book, Matthew Henson and the Ice Temple of Harlem, will be released November 17th. It is available for pre-order through Buxton Books. We'll be adding some links for that later. Matthew Henson and the Ice Temple of Harlem is the first in a new series of reimagined pulp novel that blends fact with fiction in an Indiana Jones-esque adventure following the exploits of Matthew Henson, a real-life Arctic explorer on adventures through 1920s Harlem. Gary Phillips joins us tonight from Los Angeles. Our friend and author, Christopher Chambers, is well known in the mystery community for his African-American pulp fiction. Christopher Chambers is a professor of media studies at Georgetown University, as well as a novelist, published through Random House, Macmillan, and our host tonight, Three Rooms Press. As mentioned earlier, his short stories have been included in the Anthony Award-winning anthology, The Obama Inheritance, as well as the more recent, The Faking of a President. See, more props. He earned a law degree from the University of Baltimore School of Law, has worked for the U.S. Department of Justice, and is a regular contributor on Sirius XM Radio, NPR, ABC News, MSNBC, and RT America. Chris joins us from Washington, D.C., where he lives with his wife, Diane, and German Shepherd, Max. On a personal note, thank you, Chris, for making the connections to make this evening happen.
Thank you.
Chris and Diane are friends of the bookstore and personal friends of Julian and mine. And of interest to some of you on this call, Julian and Chris share lots of wild and fun memories from their college days in the same eating club, Tiger Inn.
I can put them up now if you want.
And yes, that is the inspiration for the tiger in our Buxton Books logo. Welcome, Chris. Welcome, Gary. And welcome, Peter. We're going to go over to our post, Peter Karloftis, New York-based editor, author, and co-director, Three Rooms Press.
All right. Thank you so much,
All right.
Holly and Julian. Thanks so much. We're going to join the two authors here. It's so nice for you to have us in your store right down there in Charleston. In fact, we call it Scavenger, which is Chris's book, Scavenger Comes to Charleston, which is kind of a take on that Cotton Comes to Harlem. Who was in it? Godfrey Cambridge and Raymond St. Jacques. That was I love that movie. Yeah. I love Raymond St. Jacques. I love him in the Pawnbroker. You know, when he comes in with that lawnmower, that little lawnmower, he's like bigger than life. He's great. Brock Peters is great in that too. All right. So Polly and Julian, we're going to take this over and we'll see you in a little bit for some questions or maybe bring you back at the half. So thank you so much for having us in your store. And thanks for selling books to people. It's a good thing. You're on part of the solution. All right. So
may I add one more thing before we sign off for a little while? Would please feel free to ask questions. We've had some questions submitted already via email, but if anyone would like to submit questions in the chat, please do so, because we're going to come back in with some of those if we have time at the end.
Okay, we will be asking questions later, so put them on your comments on either Facebook or YouTube, and we'll see you in a little bit. Thank you.
Bye.
All right.
All right.
So let's put you guys on the top and me at the bottom. There you go. That's the way it should be, right?
Wow.
We can do that. We can do whatever we want.
It's master control.
Yeah. Let's enjoy ourselves. So, Gary, you've got a new book coming out in November. I think November 17th is the pub date. Matthew Henson and the Ice Temple of Harlem, which is just sounds so great. I can't wait to get my hands on it. I was hoping you to send me the ARC already or something.
Well, yeah. Well, because of COVID and what have you, Peter, it was originally going to come out in February, and then they got pushed back, and I don't think there's any real arcs. I mean, I think they put the galley up on NetGalley for reviews, but I think it's just going to go. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's going right to print, because I just signed off the actual proof a couple weeks ago.
I see what you say. So the book was supposed to come out in February, huh?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, so we kind of that's when our arcs came out for our spring book. So I got tons of arcs.
Right.
I know. So you're good. So when you get that, I'll see one of them. I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and of course we're here ultimately for Scavenger, Christopher Chambers' mystery novel about a homeless man in Washington, D.C. who kind of finds his way through the streets to become, real again to himself and solve a mystery. So it's a very genre bending mystery, and we're so happy to have published it. And I'm so glad to have both of you guys on our list. Now 3 books each. Gary, you started with the Crime Plus Music, and then we got the Obama Inheritance. We're so fortunate to have been able to just cross that path at that time and put that book together. It had a lot of great success, and I think The Faking of the President is also on the right side of history too. So, and now we have Chris's novel Scavenger, which we're ultimately here about. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there is a link there, and there's also a link to the right in your comments to order a copy of the book. So, Chris, tell me a little bit about your streets of Washington, D.C. I mean, I've spent some time down there. I think there's a lot more of a New York's always had these crazy people on the streets, but a lot of them have rent control apartments and things like that. And it's something that's kind of sadly missing in DC. So you get a lot more street denizens there, especially these days.
Yeah, it's it's a theme that has been touched on for a long time. Well before Trump, well before Obama, of 2 cities or even 3 cities, of the monuments, and then of the rich people and the diplomats, and then of everybody else. And I think it was my creative godfather, George P. Pelecanos, who began that exposing what that is, and that these really were, mean streets, even meaner streets, because you've got the monuments and the glitter, and then this patina, and a lot of just ugly stuff below that. And then within the last 10, 15 years, you add gentrification to that, and it becomes a perfect storm for stories. And I think that people take when you take George Pelecanos out of the picture, people tend to not think of Washington as a noir city in terms of the noir style. I mean, as noir as in Chocolate City, with Marion Barry, that noir, yes, but that was part of the mix that people just kind of looked at as part of the spice or part of the grittiness, kind of artificially. But I mean, my book is based on some real people that I've met that live not too far from my house. And again, it was Pelicanos who kind of, who now show runs for HBO and does a whole lot of other stuff, but and produced a season of The Wire. The Wire is probably a little bit closer in some context to what my book, but not in others. But I mean, but that kind of, as Gary said, verite, cinema verite is part of it. And I think that, you have to really parse these people and the place to really understand just how it can be a hard-boiled noir city. It
is. If you've got politics, you've got shady, underpinnings there that bring all walks of life, and especially the people and at the high need seedier people to handle their dirty deeds. So definitely it's a built-in.
And those forces come into play. I mean, as Chris said in his book in Scavenger, and in particular, I suppose when Dickie has his either his moment or his stretch of clarity. I mean, you start to see that, right? You start to see those forces, as they're coming into play, and as he, sort of gets sucked up into that, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's an undercurrent. Well, an undercurrent. It can't be an undercurrent. It could be an overview to him down at the bottom in the first maybe 20, 30 pages of the book. So there is this glitter above them. These homeless guys on these jump squads, where they get $10 a day cleaning out when your landlord kicks you out, putting your stuff on the curb, or at the shelter where this character Vern is trying to get him to stay in the shelters, and he doesn't want to. And you see this stuff. It's back there. This power and this good stuff and this wealth and the gentrifiers on the one hand and the government people on the other are back there somewhere. But when he does start to clean up artificially, and I won't it won't be a spoiler there, when he gets his job, he does have his clarity, and he's starting to see what's going on around him, but he still he's still drawn to the streets because that's his assignment. He gets sucked off of them, ironically, by this rich guy to find something and find somebody. But then he's sent right back to those same streets with a clear head. And, so that's a, really mind zonk for him as well. And then, you have the literal meeting of two worlds when he does meet this guy, Jamie Bracht, and his lawyer, who, bail him out of jail and are basically, interviewing him in a limousine. And here's his homeless guy who's very educated and was a football star in high school and in college before, drugs took him out. Talking to these guys who, want to hire him for something, but they're demeaning him and they're teasing him and they're teasing his world. I mean, it's a very cruel scene. And what's interesting to me is a friend of mine asked me, he said, well, where did you get the idea for that scene from? And I said, well, I mean, I from people I know here, from the other side, from the upstairs side, who act like that. And then you can juxtapose Jared Kushner and Don Trump Jr. in that limo talking to him and basically saying the same thing. But I did not have them in mind at all when I wrote that scene, because there are so many other people to choose from and so many other types to choose from. But this guy said, yeah, were you thinking about Jared Kushner and Donald Trump Jr.? And I'm like, no. And I said, well, they certainly remind me of them when they're in the limo messing with him and asking, where they decide whether to hire him or not, So it's I
think your guy had too much intelligence. Intelligence.
We're a little more astute, a little more cagey than those two. But it was just it was just funny that people are asking me, did you base them on Trump's son and Jared Kushner? And I'm like, no. There are plenty of people.
Didn't Kushner this weekend say something about Trump is going to provide programs for all the complaining blacks?
Yeah. It's one of those things where they were making such great headway, with Bob Johnson and 50 Cent and Kanye, and then Jared comes in and takes the mask off. You know,
you're right.
They said that you have to want to be, successful. You have to want that guy. You know what I'm saying? Come on. Get him out of our lives now. Right. Goodbye. And Gary, your guy, Matthew Henson, was born in Maryland, not far from DC.
That's right.
Spent a lot of time there. I think he met Perry there, right?
No, he actually meets Perry. Well, he does meet Perry. He meets Perry. He's actually the real story is he's working in a hat shop. Let me back up for real quick.
Okay.
So yes, he's born in Maryland, but like in a Dickens story, he runs away from home at 12 from his cruel stepmother, which is true. And he signs on, he's in DC and he goes back as a 12-year-old, just on the road. He gets back to the docks in Maryland, and then he signs on, even though he's too young. Even then he's too young. But
he's like 12, right?
He's 12. He signs on as a cabin boy with the kindly Captain Childs, who teaches him, navigational stuff, and they discuss the classics and this and that and mathematics and stuff. And so from like 12 to like, I think 18, Henson gets to see some of the world, learns about sailing and learns about the classics and learns about other things. And Captain Childs dies. And then this sort of that apprenticeship is over. But yeah, so in the Rio, when he comes back to the States, he bums around for a while and he does meet Perry, who then their first sort of adventure is in Nicaragua. And then eventually they get to the whole thing of Perry's push to try to get to the North Pole. Okay, well, I'm looking forward to reading that one. But there's just so many parallels here with DC being involved with both your characters. Right. And then I was just reading that you had that you also had a homeless character, a Vietnam vet, in one of your novels. What was it again? The underbelly, right? The underbelly, yeah. So I have to read this one because, of course, I've read Scavenger enough times. We worked on it enough. Here it is. But I think that's great that you two have that you got your character now in common with the same area, Maryland, DC area. And also, homeless characters. I mean, I was homeless in New York for a little while. I wound up sleeping in I slept in an abandoned car on Fordham Road. It was like a station wagon. And I did this for like 3-4 nights. And luckily a friend of mine said, listen, a room up the street. So I went and stayed in the room, and about 2 nights later, some car came flying up the hill at Fordham and slammed right into that abandoned car. I would have been dead. You know what I mean? Had I not. So the streets were no place for anybody. That's got to be good for noir, though. I think to Chris's point, man, that you have these characters that are, they're not in any way connected to normal society, right? They're not even working class guys, right? They're kind of without, they're kind of invisible. And yet they, not only are they the, sort of the victims or at least the recipients of lack of proper policies and what have you. But they get a unique view of society, of how things are working or not working. When in fact, you can't even find a place to lay your head at night. Absolutely, yeah. No, I
wanted to add, Peter, that in a way, these books are kind of an extension of the Darker Mask, which Gary and I worked together on. We co-edited, which was an illustrated anthology through Macmillan that was really well received, and we had some superstar illustrators and authors in there. Matt Henson, Lorenzo Carcaterra, who wrote Sleepers, and those superheroes were kind of like Dickie. We're kind of like, and some of them were real people like Matt Henson, and we just elevated them to another level. It it wasn't as some snarky fool told me once, is this like the ghetto X-Men? And I'm like, no. But this is a continuation of that, and it's kind of kismet that Gary and I are together, with this. So
it is kismet. It's natural, and I'm so glad that we were able to work on both those wonderful anthologies, Obama Inheritance and The Faking of the President. I'm kind of thinking about a third one now. A third one now for all women, and I was thinking of Femocrats. What do you think? Like, do we get instead of Democratic, Femocratic? Oh, something like that. So I'm gonna have to talk to one of these, one of our women from the book to see if they want to carry the torch for us. On that end, all women only. Anyhow, I'm gonna bow out for a while, and I'll be back in a little while. Why don't you guys take on? What you're feeling here, take it from the homeless, take it from your characters. And
of course I'm gonna ask Chris. So yeah.
Okay, good. So I'll be catching up with you a little later. You guys enjoy yourselves because everybody else is going to enjoy you too. I know that. All right.
Oh, there we go. He cut himself off. Wow. So Chris, let's talk a little bit about, because this came up in our previous outing. How is it, or how did you arrive at the way you tell the story in the book? And I'm not giving anything away to talk about the fact that Dickie has a voice in his head.
Yeah, I mean, and it's
right.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, I mean, and again, it's there are a variety of creative and then real world forces coming in there. I mean, Gary's not giving anything away. I mean, the narrative of the novel is in second person, which is difficult. It's a difficult read. I mean, I've had somebody, a book club, said, they picked it because it was a difficult read. And a second person narrator is very difficult. And authors don't want to mess with it. Probably the only way you can do it is if you have either a protagonist who's mentally ill, or there's a story being told, kind of like, The Usual Suspects with the FBI agent talking to, or whatever, talking to Kevin Spacey. But it is a voice in his head. It's his father, who may or may not still be alive, may or may not be in the old soldiers and sailors home up the street here as a vegetable. But the narrator can lie. The narrator is very abusive. The narrator is using very politically incorrect terms, to describe Dickie, to describe people around him, to describe situations, to describe Dickie's mother, to describe Dickie's sister, who committed suicide a long time ago during the drug scourges there in the mid '80s in DC. The Wild West we had at in the middle of one of Marion Barry's terms, and it's a very difficult thing to write. It's a very difficult thing to read, and then. One of the reasons I did that was, I think I've told you before. I mean, Kenji Jasper, this cat is very creative, and kind of his book Nostrand Avenue was written in second person, and he said, try it, if you dare. I also talked to people like, there are people like Pelicanos who said, the genre has to evolve. I talked about that in my essay in Crime Reads about Justice for the Invisible. I mean, the genre has to evolve from, Auguste Dupin, was Poe's character, and Miss Marple, and all that stuff, and Mike and Mickey Spillane. It's got to move on from that. And you've got people like Chester Himes, who wrote Cotton Comes to Harlem, who were the genesis of that. But I mean, so I had my charge was to try to do something different. So that was the artistic charge. Everybody's doing the same thing. I mean, so what am I going to do to set this apart? I said, I'm going to write it in second person, and it's second person first tense. So it's second person, and it's unwinding as you're reading it. So it's not an omniscient third person past, I did this, then he went to the door. It's, you're going to the door now. What do you see? And it's like, what do you see, you big dumbass? So it's a difficult read.
Well, but as you also said, like like in classic noir, he could be an unreliable narrator.
Right. Right.
And then, but there are also times in which, I mean, I think this is the great thing you do in the narrative, which is to say, yes, there's unreliable parts to Dickie's head, but it's also the case that a lot of the narrative or the clarity of the narrative comes through.
Yeah. And here, you know, I mean, there are times when you say the first maybe 20, maybe 50 pages, I mean, Dickie stammers. And the narrator is chiding him for stammering and calling him a bum and, you know, and all this kind of stuff, you know, what the F is wrong with you. But as he gets his moments of clarity, you see the second person narrator actually backing him up sometimes,
right? Rather
than constantly breaking him down. I mean, you're scum, you're garbage. Look at you, you're like an animal. I mean, look at these people that you're with, and the narrator is actually helping him along. Like, do you really want to open that door?
Yeah.
If you don't open that door, you might be SOL. But if you do, you know, there are times where it becomes a conversation where the voice is helpful. Most of the time, it's either neutral, either driving the plot or driving the narrative, or it's very abusive towards him.
Yeah. Let me ask you, just in a structural sense, and I thought about this as I read the book, and I thought about this again as we were talking about it. I guess it was last week. It was, which is to say that as you're writing the book, do you find as you go back in to sort of look at it again and maybe edit some things or shift some things around, and particularly because of the way you now have chosen to tell the story, as you said, sort of in this kind of hyper second person kind of, maybe it's real, maybe it ain't all real to Dickie kind of thing, or it's, you know, some parts of his ear talking to him, that you find that, you know, how did you keep track? I guess that's really the question I want to know as a writer. How did you keep track? What are the notes that you made that you knew that you had to like either shift or change a certain thing in dialogue or change a certain thing in maybe how you show a perspective, so that yes, it requires you to pay attention to read, but clearly you want the reader to come along.
Well, I mean, you know how that is, man. I mean, you know, you got Post-its and notes and stuff written on the back of McDonald's wrappers, and you know, I'm not. You know, I wish I was that organized. I know some people who, you know, people like you know, like Kelly Garrett at you know, who runs Crime Writers of Color. I mean, she did a lot of television writing, so it's very easy for somebody like her to put different color Post-its on a wall because she spent time like in a writer's room. But you and I, you know, we didn't start off like that. I mean, it's a solitary, keep track where you can. So I had to basically keep track of a lot of things all at once. And in different, I mean, I literally had 2 or 3 versions of this manuscript that I had to I had to cannibalize and, you know, cut and paste and then work in to keep track of all of this, because the other danger is you don't want the second person narrator to become too third person. You know, how does Dickie's voice know that there's, you know, Godzilla and Rodan are behind that door? I mean, he doesn't, you know, I mean, he can surmise things. So I have to keep that in, you know, and I also had to deal with different characters. I had to, the different versions were also to keep track of the different characters, because you have a second person, not very omniscient narrator as this is unfolding, measuring up and dealing with these characters. So I had to develop different characters through the eyes of his crazy ass father in his head, and him. So when he meets Gary Phillips, what's the father going to say about Gary? You know, who is this son of a bitch? You know, and Gary, you know, and so I have to keep track of that too. So it was crazy. It was nerve wracking.
But nonetheless, but a good, satisfying, you know, result, worth the effort. Well, let me ask you that. Let me ask this then. What did you think? I mean, the whole notion of gentrification is a big issue, and clearly neighborhoods need to change. They need to offer services to the people who reside there. But the problem's always been that with, the pattern has been that the artists show up, right, because of cheap rents, and they become kind of the vanguard, or at least that's how it's worked out here in LA. The artists show up, because it's hip and kind of edgy and sketchy and cheap rents. But then they kind of bring their little sensibilities with it. So then they start to shift the neighborhood a little bit. Then the realtors start to take a notice of that. And then, then the artists become a sort of vanguard for this other thing that, happens down the line. Yeah. Out here, for instance, there's an area called Boyle Heights. And the people in Boyle Heights, or the residents of Boyle Heights, which is a traditional Latinx area. Like a la the Zapatistas, some of these folks put on, this is before COVID, put on their handkerchiefs bandit style, and literally got in the streets, literally got in the faces to try to halt gentrification. So I guess that's part of the discussion, which is to say, is it inevitable anyway? That whatever Dickie is experiencing, is he fighting? I mean, not to be pessimistic, but is he fighting a losing battle? Is the change going to come anyway?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. He was so down in a certain strata that, and this comes into why I did the book the way I did, and the influence of somebody like Pelicanos. Right. He and the people that he's around are so far down on the social strata that they don't even notice this. Right. And a matter of fact, that some of them are actually enamored of it because there are more rich white people that can, maybe help them out with $1, right, or while they're walking their dog, and they can, can I need $1.50 for the bus. Oh, here, I'm walking my dog in my yoga pants. Here, have $5. Yeah, and at the same time, and they are actually in kind of conflict with the working poor who are being displaced. Right. So you have an interesting situation where both the gentrifiers and the working poor in these neighborhoods don't like Dickie and his cohorts. But in DC, it's a very different situation. I mean, it wasn't really. It's really kind of the more kind of white collar intelligentsia people rather than artists. Yes. Who moved into these neighborhoods. I mean, the house I'm sitting in now is 115 years old. And we bought it a while back, but it affects Dickie personally in that his family is part of that milieu of the Black middle class, right, that left the city, that abandoned it probably after the riots. Yeah. A lot of people talk about white flight. I mean, what would really put things askew in a kilter was Black middle class and even upper class, if you think about things, leaving these neighborhoods, and we, as a personal matter, I mean, my family, we think of ourselves as coming back, kind of a thing. It's kind of like the diaspora. This is. We were in the wilderness. We were a tribe in the wilderness. And now we're back in Israel. So we're reclaiming it, our block. Right. This is where we used to live. We're coming back and living here. But that's how Dickie actually sees some of his when he's a little more little less clear. Some of his exploits is like, look, I used to live here, or I used to be part of this neighborhood, and I wasn't a poor person. My father was a Marine gunnery sergeant and then sergeant major, and my mother was a teacher. Right. And I went to Howard University, and I played football, and I went to Catholic school and played football. I was part of this milieu before basically the poor people took it over, and here I am living underneath them. So I mean, there's an interesting kind of class bitterness there that I think the voice, the second person narrator, goes into quite a bit. Right. He Dickie kind of goes along with it, but it flavors the novel, and I think I like the fact that it does that, because otherwise I could have set it in New Orleans or Brooklyn or L.A. I mean, right. I think it needed that kind of local flavor.
Right. I mean, I think it's a very important point, as we know, that you know, in mystery novels, in the detective novel, invariably, you know, location, where things take place, not even necessarily the city, it could be just the neighborhood, but obviously those are factors that, you know, there are some similarities, right? But there are a lot of things that are very particular and are very specific to a place, to a time. And I guess that's part of the job, which is to try to capture that, right? To try to put that, you know, on the page for the reader to, whether the reader's familiar with that area or particularly if the reader is not familiar with that area, it brings them in, it pulls them in. But I guess that kind of thing gets me to a kind of another question, or partly an observation, but really a question, which is to say, I guess is that not the beauty of the mystery novel, which is to say, upon that in that genre, that you can, if you think about it enough, or if you work it hard enough, that landscape allows you to, whether you want to tell a story about gentrification or chemical waste or even climate change, that the genre allows you to do that. Well,
yeah, I mean, I heard when we were on, I think with Murder by the Book. I mean, they had a program on afterward with, I think, with John Grisham.
Yeah,
and John Grisham said that, you know, mysteries and thrillers are America's literary genre. You know, with all due respect to the literary writers out there and everybody else. I mean, I'm not trying to claim any superiority, but I mean, we're the jazz of the literary arts, you know, for this country, and you know, our genre provides a stepping stone. We can talk about anything.
Yes.
And structuring it anyway, from cozies to hard-boiled, but it can hit all these different issues. And I think that's the beauty of what you can do as a mystery writer.
Dig it. No, I agree. I mean, I think it is. I think it's probably. I mean, you know, all said and done, it is certainly the thing that attracted me as a young person to the genre, just as a reader, and then let alone trying to write it. But the notion that, I think, as you said, that you could have these various riffs, whether the riffs are, you know, the hard driving beat, which I guess is the noir and hard boiled, or it's more, you know, the soft tempo. It is more the cozy, or somewhere in between, right? That there's all these various degrees, there's all these various ways in which that can get played out, and part of that has to do with how much you put on the screen or on the stage, and how much happens off stage, and how much is implied. But nonetheless, it can work. I think it can. I think
by the way, I'm moving because something's going on with my computer. So.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, now you're not fuzzy. You were fuzzy for a second.
Right.
There you go. All right. There's some kind of trip. I don't know. It's all the CIA tap. It's all right.
Yes.
It's just Trump. Well, let me ask. I guess then the question then is, now that you've done this with this novel,
right?
You feel, and actually, this is, you know, we talked a little bit about Himes before, and we as we both know, and as I think some folks out there who have read them know, there was certainly a certain absurdist quality to the Himes books, right? Particularly to the his so-called Harlem books, which are, you know, Coffin Ed Johnson and Gravedigger Jones. And Himes, who didn't really spend that much time in Harlem, kind of created a Harlem of the mind, kind of created a Harlem that he wanted to portray, that he needed to populate with his strange and odd and weird characters.
Right.
And particularly his two detectives. But certainly by the time you get toward the end of the cycle, when you get to like Blind Man with a Pistol, which, like, the first half of the book is plot, and then the second half of the book, he just throws the plot out, and it's just sort of ruminations about race and what have you in America. It's not just a jest, but it becomes something different, right? And I guess then I'm curious to know for yourself, do you feel the challenge is, whatever book you next write, do you feel the challenge is that now you have to one up yourself? You have to, you know what I mean? That do you make a turn back into more a sort of more traditional structure, or are you concerned that you have to be even more experimental, have more riffs in the next book you attempt?
Well, I mean, I'm glad you brought up Chester, because he was really the warm-blooded dinosaur. You know, he was the protoplasm that a lot of us, you know, are sprung from.
Right.
And you know, it is weird. You know, his early works were a lot more, I guess, what would you call it, academically deeper than the Harlem detective book. But he's known for the Harlem detective books, and that's what puts him up there with Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler and all those people. Yes. But what I want to do is try to remain true to what I'm doing now. I mean, at least come up with something to give Dickie another platform. But you know, without giving too much away, clearly, you know, he's left in an interesting place. I mean, he's left. You know, we talk about how in mysteries, especially when we talk about poor people, there's no justice, or you know, the bad guy doesn't really get it, and all you just move stuff to equilibrium. All you just want to do is move it to equilibrium. Well, he's at an equilibrium now, and where does he go from here? He's cleaned up, but he's still poor, and he's still, you know, I mean, my protoplasmic characters that I talk about in the Crime Reads essay. There'd be no Dickie Cornish without Socrates Fortlow or Easy Rollins. Right. Well, Easy Rollins and Socrates Fortlow didn't end up fat and happy at the end of any of these books, or any of these stories. So, what I have to do is basically try to incorporate what made this different into a new story. And you know, how can I have Dickie still talking to his dad? He's not taking his meds. Yeah. Right. And that is a very cinema verite theme. A lot of people do not do that. So he's not taking his meds at the VA. Well, why isn't he doing that? Well, a third of the guys that I've met over at the VA hospital, which is a half a mile up from my house, don't take their meds. So, you know, so that's how I solved that. That's pretty easy. Right. But I mean, in terms of other stuff, you know, you know, man, I mean, it's a constant creative battle. Beyond Dickie, I don't know. I mean, I would like to do more stuff with sorry, that's the star of the Obama inheritance in the back. He said, you know, be sure to talk about my story of the Obama inheritance. Exactly. That's right. But you know, I'd really love to go back to do more pulp. And, you know, I've talked about that and experiment there. But with this character, I think he's going to evolve, and eventually he'll evolve into a first-person narrator. You know, as he gets better. In other words, and cleaner. That's what he'll do. All right. Very good. All right. So you do indeed plan to revisit Dickie. Yeah, I'm working on that now. And the plot, you know, stuff is again attached to poor people. Probably more so really than this one. The only difficulty is I'm trying to write it in a Washington that's kind of now, you know, masked, and you know, how do I write it? You know, I'm thinking about just not working on the manuscript at all, waiting to see what happens next week. But you know, it's a real concern that a lot of writers have talked about. You're right, that like at this moment, do I write a story as if things are quote unquote normal, not the new normal, but the normal, right? Or do I write it? Or you're like you said, do you wait? The vaccine hopefully shows up at some point, and now it's sort of all past tense, you know, in the story. Or does it take place with masks on? Yeah, well, I mean, what I've done is kind of delved into the, you know, the alternate reality genre too, and just kind of imagined kind of otherworld, you know, where there isn't a vaccine, but there's other things going on, and you know, it's kind of a disease that's visited on more of the poorer people, and some people are wearing masks and some people aren't. That kind of a thing. So I try to keep it, you know, I don't want to get it too tied into the politics. Right. But I mean, it has to be to an extent. I mean, because this book was, because, you know, they were in a situation where their social services were basically decimated. Shelters and stuff like that were either decimated or privatized, and that's a real thing that happened in the course of me writing the first book, and other things going on too in terms of crime and politics in the city. Were pretty much contemporaneous, but trying to write it now, that's kind of hard. You got to be Johnny Carson's got Karnak the Great,
What? But you raised another interesting point that I've thought about, and it's gotten some ink, which is to say, also in this time period now, as we sort of, not that police abuse is something new, but now that we look at it sort of post, or not quite post, but in this time of the murder of George Floyd, and the notion that defund the police, however you might interpret that, or the shifting of the budgets of police budgets, and maybe some of that would go more towards social service, some of that would go more towards mental health intervention, as opposed to guys showing up with guns to deal with somebody who's going off the rails. And that, of course, also remains to be. I mean, it's become a big thing. A lot of cities become a big thing here in LA, and of course, that also remains to be seen how that gets played out. But it does suggest something else to sort of keep in mind, because how that will shade and color what it is that you write.
Oh yeah, I mean, the police were not as big of a deal in this book. I mean, they were more of a reality-based entity for somebody like Dickie, which would be they would be people that come by and mess with you for no reason, but then otherwise, when you need them, they're not there.
Yeah.
And there is a dichotomy between the federal cops and this is something that I kind of predicted in this book, between the Park Police, Capitol Hill Police to some extent, and some of the executive branch federal cops versus the Metropolitan Police Department.
Right.
You saw that in the protests, and you saw that when Trump, had them gas a path to the church that
to the church.
These guys dressed in green were all federal police of some sort. Right. And in the book, it's the Park Police and people like that are rousting him and almost kill him and hurt his friends, which is how he ends up in jail. It's not the Metropolitan Police. They're more kind of a not a benign force, but kind of a nothing that's there to bother you when you don't want to be bothered. And then when some teenagers are maybe beating you up, they're looking and laughing.
There you
go. And as a homeless man, if some teenagers are beating you up, or something and what I'm working on now, they're more of that's more of a situation. I mean, that kind of defund the police kind of notion is more of a factor in the story I'm working on now, but it's not overriding factor, but it's present.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's a good point. You're right. It's always about trying to, on one hand, you want to make the book topical, but on the other hand, you don't want to make it so much so that it sets it so hard in a specific time period that people, when they come to it 10 years from now, they say, oh, it's all outdated or whatever's all played, so it is an interesting balance. You're right. It's a very interesting balance to try to figure that out. Because again, it's always about the characters in the end, but still real life events, of course, are going to play, a factor in what you write and how you write it at any given moment in time.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Hello, gentlemen. How are you?
I'm fine.
I'm jumping back in. That was all great topics and digging into the neighborhoods and what's going on and how things are likely to change. I mean, there's going to be a lot of change. Hopefully, some for the better. We got to hope eventually that something is for the better. I mean, it's not just now, but it's especially now. It's not only this moment, but this moment is pressing so hard on everybody that we've got to defund the police. Let's go. Let's start now. I'll go out and start talking to them right now. We're not telling you that you can't have your loudy racist freaking union leaders for this moment, but they got to fucking go. You know what I mean? These guys have got to be eliminated from the budget. That's the defunding part. You know what I mean? And so many other people in these gentrified neighborhoods are what do they mean defund the police? I wanted my protection. We got to start thinking outside the box. We can't walk the same path anymore. We know this. So, and it's up to, us with Scavenger, with the book Scavenger, and with the books we're doing to offer a new paths in the mind, for those options that people can say, yeah, that is possible, even though if it's fiction, even though it's your Harlem of yore that doesn't exist. That's how you can, foment change. And be an avant-garde leader, not just an artist who comes in and has a neighborhood turned upside down. You're going to turn that mind upside down and get away from knowing that the police, are just not on the right track right now, man. They gotta be defunded, and in defunded doesn't mean that there's not going to be any police anymore. It means that how they're being run, has got to turn around, man. You guys, come on, we're doing it. We're changing this world right now with fiction. Well, our fiction is got more to do with the change to come than the reality they're dealing with now, I think. Anyhow, yeah, and like you were talking about Himes with the Harlem that he created. Well, you've done the same with Matthew Henson, no?
Yeah, a little bit of that. I mean, it's set in 28. So sort of the tail end of the Roaring 20s is right before the big crash, but everything is kind of at play. Sort of the Harlem Renaissance is still, happening. I have Dutch Schultz, who's trying to crowd in on the numbers racket, which began in Harlem. Queenie St. Clair, who was a real person, Stephanie St. Clair, a very interesting real life person. She's running, part of the rackets. So she's in the book.
Was she the numbers runner?
No, she's queen. She's the boss. She's
okay.
She's in charge of the runners.
Okay.
Because at this point, Bumpy Johnson's actually in jail. A longer story, but Bumpy is the one who actually brokers the peace. That's when he gets out of jail in a couple of years. But at this point, so Schultz is trying to muscle in. Queenie is fighting Schultz. Bessie Coleman shows up, who was the first Black woman to get her pilot's license in the States, although she had to go to France to study because no American aviation school would take her. Anyway, so all that's in the mix. Tesla shows up. So it's all kind of heady and hopefully exciting.
Well, I'm sure it's exciting if you wrote it, Gary. We've got the Obama Inheritance, which was very exciting, and we were on NPR with that, and a lot of other great things. And then we got the next one in the New York Times. So, and now we're up to Scavenger. In fact, I'll put that banner back up. You can order your copy here, and I'm sure the link is in the comments.
There you go.
And Gary's, I think, is available also through Buxton for pre-order right now. So please put in your pre-order for Gary's book, Matthew Henson and the Ice Temple of Harlem. And Scavenger is just a fantastic modern noir DC set. A homeless vet gets put in a position to, do the right thing and finds himself again. So it's a good tale, and it's a different kind of a tale in the genre. And if you open up to it, it will open up to you.
There you
it's kind of a two-way street kind of a book. I think you'll love it. I mean, it takes. That's why he came to me with that book. I said, yeah, this has got something that others aren't looking for at all. They want to just, be what is and what was, and it's going to be could be, and not what could be anymore. It is something new. It's right here. It's the real McCoy. It's in your hand.
So.
Yeah, no, it is. It's there, and we're going to be doing good things with it. And I'm sure Dickie Cornish is going to have a good life in the genre. So maybe now we'll bring up our friends at Buxton and Monica. She might have some questions. You think? Is that what we want to do? Monica, are we bringing you up for questions?
Yeah, awesome.
Okay. Let me go out and ask your questions to.
Great. If you'd like to cut yourself off again. Yeah, so we have some great questions that were sent in. The first one, so Dickie lives near the National History Museum and the Smithsonian. Did you write any of your favorite DC locations into the book? If so, which ones were they?
Not really favorite, but things that, because it's not that kind of story, but I do a lot of some things take place in my neighborhood, which is a gentrified neighborhood in and of itself, but not really my favorite. I use the Natural History Museum because it has a lot of natural cover, even in the wintertime. And there are steam grates and stuff like that people have built tents. You know, Dickie had his weird little canvas concoction on, and he was taking care of those two women who were homeless too. And it actually has access to those public bathrooms that I write about. There's a lot of crazy stuff that goes on in there, but it's I wouldn't say it's researched. It's more like I've grown up around these places, so I knew that they were there.
Right.
And but I don't really have any quote favorite places because it's not really that kind of story. But I try to spread things around. I mean, there's action that takes place in a very Latinx neighborhood in the city that a lot of people don't really talk about, called Mount Pleasant, because there is a Latinx influence in the book with the trafficking, human trafficking. So not really favorite places, but I try to make it look. I try not to make it a travel log.
Yeah.
In the next story, we're going to go to Southeast DC. So tell them, don't worry, it's going to get real.
Well, you talked about how location matters to the story earlier. So would any chance that you'd write another book, or maybe even a Dickie Cornish book that's set in Princeton?
Oh, wow. Well, I have to tell you this, and this is going to piss off a lot of people. Without ruining anything, the one of the guys who interviews him in the limousine is giggling a lot about. Dickie asked him and his lawyer, "Did you guys know each other from college?" And the antagonist, who's kind of a sociopath, said, "No, I went to Princeton. My lawyer here, we met at University of Texas Law School. We didn't go to undergrad together." So Princeton's in there, but I do have a prize. I forgot what the young people call it. Not a donut. What is that term? See, I'm acting like an old Bob. Easter egg, yes.
Right.
Don't.
Yeah, close enough.
There'll be some in the next story. There'll be some aspect to that. So don't worry. Stay tuned.
All right, Princeton fans. Diana asks. Diana also says Dickie goes Ivy League.
Yeah. Right.
She also asks, do you consider Dickie Cornish to be a hero? If so, how?
Yeah, I mean, and we talked about this before, and this is Dickie goes Ivy League. I mean, Dickie was a scholar athlete at Howard University. I mean, he sleeps. Sometimes he when he's wandering around, he's near the university, and he runs away when he sees the students, because some of them just look at him as an animal, and are ashamed of him, and some of them, give him money. But imagine being being looking at the place where you were a star, where you were an athlete and a scholar, basically, and now you're smoking K2 and drinking Mickey's Green Grenades to wash the K2 fumes down with. But I consider him a hero because he's doing something that when we're faced with the abyss. do we run away from it? Do we dive into it head first? We got nothing to do, or we try to cross it somehow? And he tries to cross it. He doesn't fold up and die like he pretty much wants to. And he's given an opportunity to do something right, and ironically by evil people. And he has to decide, how do I do something right? But how do I also make it so that these evil people who've enabled me to have my life back, how do I fight them too? And it's a tough situation. I mean, you look at it with somebody like in real life with Gary's book with Matt Henson. I mean, he's thrust into a situation voluntarily that demands heroism. If there's no heroism, you're going to die. You're either not going to get there or you're not going to get back. With Dickie, it's more of a constant choice and a constant every minute questioning yourself. What do I do? And a lot of these people, they don't start off as heroes. They start off as very flawed people. And if I may, I mean, I think I had mentioned before when I was a little boy, one of my uncles took me to see a movie with, I wasn't that little, but it was Steve McQueen called The Sand Pebbles. And it really imprinted on me. It was a book, and it was about the U.S. Navy in China in the 1920s. And Steve McQueen, who plays a lot of anti-hero heroes, was a sailor in the Navy on this gunboat, and he did a lot of really terrible, stupid things. And he didn't even survive the end of the movie. But for every stupid, awful thing he did 5 good things, and he saw good things in people that were salvageable. I mean, even the Chinese, who the rest of the crew racistly called slopes and dinks and stuff like that, he humanized them and was demonized for that. And so I look at people like that as heroes. People who, there are a lot of paper heroes right now, and a lot of paper heroes that are worshipped. I look at Dickie as somebody who I think is somebody who's flawed and down low and rises to the occasion, and that's a hero. But again, so is Matt Henson, because if you're not a hero, you're not gonna stay alive. So so there are 2 different scenarios there of heroism.
Yeah. Okay. I have 2 last questions. Going off of this whole hero thing and everything. And Gary, you can answer this question too. Who do you think would play Dickie in a movie?
You want to go first? Yeah.
You go first, and I'll chime in on mine.
Well, I mean, we're in the process of trying to make that happen, but and I'm trying to be cagey about it, but let's say that after I wrote the manuscript and I turned it in, and they were working on it, I was watching a news report about somebody who may or may not be able to play James Bond when what's his face retires. And I think in terms of physicality and presence, he's probably the closest fit that I can think of. I can't tell you his name, but his name rhymes with Midris Melba.
Yeah. And he played an American. He played American several times in The Wire.
Yeah, he was Stringer Bell. Yeah,
Stringer Bell. Yeah.
I'd watch that for sure.
There you go.
All right. So last questions. We have a lot of questions.
I wanted to answer about who I thought played Matthew Henson.
Oh, you want to be Midris Melba?
From everything. Just
I have ideas about that Matthew Henson too.
That's right. That's right. No, I've always liked this actor Anthony Mackie, who has been around a long time and he's played various roles. I guess recently they did an interesting. He and Samuel Jackson did an interesting cable movie about. It was actually based on real life. These 2 guys who were kind of like black real estate guys. It's kind of boring how they did the story, unfortunately.
I know.
Yeah, it was actually
came out, I think, right?
Yeah. But I've always liked Mackie. I always thought so. Anyway, he would be my idea to play Henson.
Yeah, what's funny is that I was going to say is that first I said Anthony Mackie, who he's in the Marvel movies. He's the Falcon.
Yeah.
But then I was thinking about his co-star in that weird Black Mirror episode. The guy who played the Black Manta.
Oh, right.
In Aquaman.
And
he was in that Black Mirror episode.
You're right.
I forgot his name.
Yeah,
but I think him with a mustache.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah.
Lots of options. That's good.
Yeah. Well, who would play Perry though? Like
well, Perry hardly shows up. He's just mentioned as an aside.
Right.
It's really his Inuit buddy that shows up.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the tough thing. I mean, when you start writing stories like ours that aren't based on traditional people you see as heroes or as PIs and detectives, and you have a movie. I mean, how do you cast Inuits? They were the real heroes. Yeah. Like the Sherpas who took the white guys up Mount Everest.
Exactly.
I mean, movies, you get to play them. Some Hawaiian guy, it's hard to do. And, you can cast Madame St. Clair, but you can't, it's hard to cast stuff like that, So I've given that some thought, Gary. I was thinking of you like, who plays Stephanie St. Clair and who could play Bessie Coleman and all that.
Exactly.
All right. So the last question before I give it over to Polly for closing remarks. We have a lot of questions actually coming in from people wanting to know more about a recent Chris Chambers dance video released on the internet. Where he learned his dance moves and if he will dance like that for us tonight.
Here's the thing. It was a video taken when I was a senior in college, and my father had gotten like the first kind of prototypical kind of VCR camera, and my brother, who was like 11 or 12 at the time, said, "Why don't you start? Let's turn on some music." And I think it was Robert Palmer's "Addicted to Love." And I basically was dancing to that. I think I looked like that guy from L.A., Shabadoo Quinones, the guy who was doing the popping and locking. I kind of had the same hair and the same greasy mustache. And very good. And I was dancing to that in a pair of surgical pants and pretty much nothing else. So I'm not going to dance like that now. Not until, I get some keto on me and lose a couple.
We can't tell people to buy the book and we'll send you the video.
Buy the book. If you buy the book, that's how jaded some people are out there. If you bought the book, I was donating money to a shelter addiction program here. Now I'm to the point where if I get up and dance, you buy the book. If you buy the book, I will do that. I'll send you something and I'll put it on everything on Facebook. Don't worry.
All right. Well, Polly, I'm going to take it over to you. Thanks, guys.
Oh, wow. What a conversation. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Gary. And thank you, Chris, for that conversation. As a bookseller, I can't end without a really strong call to action. And one of the things that we've noticed over the past 7 months is that people are reading outside of their comfort zones. And I have to tell you, Gary and Chris and Peter, your books are outside of my comfort zone. And that's good. It's a good thing. And so thank you for writing them and thank you for publishing them. And for those of you who showed up this evening, or if you're watching this in real time or later on as it's recorded, buy the book. Buy a new book from an independent bookseller. Love it if you buy it from Buxton Books, but buy it from wherever you buy your books and make it an independent bookseller. But buy new books because that's how the ecosystem works. We get to keep hosting conversations like this and selling books. Three Rooms Press gets to keep publishing. Chris and Gary get new book deals, and it really is, it's how it works. And it starts with you, the reader. Purchase a new book, buy one for a friend, make it a new book from an independent bookseller, and thank you for making a better world, because books.
Thanks for having us. It was great.
Definitely.
Right on.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, we want to have you all back in person, as wonderful as it is to gather. Let's do it in Charleston next time. It'll be good.
Right on.
Be good.
Good.
Right on, and thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. Hang on for a second. We're going to take off the broadcast, but hang on.